Text, Chaffey College. Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art. Home Edition. The outline of a house appears around the text. AIGA presents Firebelly design. Will Miller, Tom Tian, and Dean Sweetnick. March 5, 2021 from 2 to 3 p.m. PST. Rebecca Trawick.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us at today's program featuring Firebelly design, presented as part of the Wignall Museum's Home Edition in collaboration with the Chaffey College AIGA Club. Home Edition is a series of curated artist talks, workshops, and discussions featuring artists and cultural workers. My name is Rebecca Trawick. I'm the director and curator of the Wignall Museum. The Wignall Museum is a teaching museum and interdisciplinary art space that introduces Chaffey College students, faculty, and staff to innovative contemporary art objects and ideas. By fostering critical thinking, visual literacy, discourse, and empathy, the museum seeks to enhance the intellectual and cultural life of our community. We want to take a moment to recognize that we are situated on the Rancho Cucamonga campus of Chaffey College, which resides on the traditional and unceded lands of the Tongva people. We offer our recognition and respect to the elders, both past, present, and future.
Roman Stollenberg.
Hello, my name is Roman Stollenberg. I'm the assistant curator at the Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art. We'd like to remind you to go ahead and visit us at www.chaffey.edu/Wignall to access our full schedule of programs and available recordings. Please note we're recording all sessions of Home Edition. When possible, recordings will be made available on our website. An announcement will post to our email subscribers and social media when new videos are available. All recordings on our site include captions and audio descriptions as options. Thank you.
This program is a 25-minute presentation followed by questions and discussion. Andy Hadel.
And hi, everyone. My name is Andy Hadel. I am the preparator at the museum. Along with Rebecca and Roman, I'll be assisting with today's Zoom session. In a moment, Firebelly Design will present for about a half an hour or so, with the remaining time being available for Q&A.
Trawick.
Great. Before we introduce our esteemed guests, I want to recognize the AIGA Design Club, the Chaffey College student chapter of AIGA. Thank you to the chapter for choosing today's guest artists. The AIGA Design Club is a group of dedicated designers who provide a space to create, connect, and inspire. AIGA offers aspiring professionals the opportunity to get involved, create community, and build leadership skills, seeking designers, photographers, and illustrators. So on to our guests. Today, we're pleased to introduce Firebelly designers Will Miller, Tom Tian, and Dean Sweetnick. Firebelly is a socially conscious creative studio specializing in strategic design. Since its founding in 1999, Firebelly has partnered with mission-driven organizations of every size who value good design as an integral part of their business communications. Headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, Firebelly is an intentionally small, consciously diverse, and uber-talented design studio. Through a collaborative process, they run across client management, research, strategy, design, and development. Their portfolio spans industries and reflects the diversity of the communities their clients serve. Please see an expanded biography on our website, and we'll put that in the chat as well. So we're so pleased to have Will, Tom, and Dean joining us from Chicago and elsewhere today. So please join me in giving them a warm virtual welcome.
Will Miller.
Hello, everybody. Obviously, wonderful introductions. We're Firebelly Design, or one small portion of Firebelly Design. Speaking with you today, of course, myself, Will, and Tom, as well as Dean. And just wanted to say again, thanks for having us here. It's great to get to do this. It's great to sort of talk about the work that we do and how we do that. Like I said, the three of us really are just one small portion of Firebelly Design. And ripped straight from our website, and you've already heard a description, but here's another one. The studio is really a tight-knit team of optimists who believe in each other and our clients' causes. And we really work to bring authenticity in ourselves, and maybe ourselves being the more important part of this, into the studio work and into what we do. And our hope is that that is how we stand out in the work that we do and how we do that. So the work that we've done together is a gratifying reminder of what it takes to make great work, important work, feel creative, and collaborate in these, ultra weird and isolating times that we all find ourselves in. Great work and important work, just a little bit about that. As practicing designers, we find ourselves often thinking that making great work means establishing lots of rules. But really, as humans of planet Earth, making important work to us means breaking a lot of those. In other words, we're really here to do something, not just make something. And I keep saying we, but really, who is that we? Just a quick look at the team. Some cool people, some really nice people, of course, smart people, lots of people. Just wanted to show some of the faces behind the scenes.
Black and white portraits of crew.
Some of them are with us today on the call, but the everyday crew of Firebelly, we're designers, we're developers. Some of us are researchers and strategists, writers, project managers, lots of hobbies, lots of interests, many, many passions that fall far outside the realm of just design. And today with you, we call ourselves Design Pod, and that's me, that's Tom, that's Dean, that's also Ruth. She is on the call too. She's our newest member of the team, not with us today on the talk, but she came in a little late after we had already signed up for doing this. So she's with us in spirit. She's there as a photo. It's great. We love her. She's a wonderful member of our team. The word Design Pod, or just the idea of the word pod, really comes from when we had a much more centrally located office and desks that were together. We still have that office. It was an actual post office, a functioning post office. And most of us are, kind of post office now too.
A storefront with carved stone pillars. A food truck is parked in the front.
This is the front of that space. The truck did not come with it, but it's wonderful that on Google Street View, you get a nice close up of that incredible food truck just parked out front.
Photos of interior, painted black and gray brick walls with office chairs and file cabinets.
Captured a few images the other day of some of the inside of this space. Again, filing cabinets, plant life, chairs, a little bit of workout equipment here and there.
Banners on the wall that say, "Be brave, be kind."
It's a real great space for being collaborative. It's open like this. We can sort of move around each other and we can talk when we're able to do that. On the walls, we have different signage reminding us what's important, to be brave, be kind, as we all work together and collaborate together.
Pencils and art books on a table.
And as you move through the space, you'll just encounter different things on the shelves, on the tables, on the desks. They're just different points of inspiration to sort of pick up, look through, feel inspired, as we do this design work, as we do work together. And this idea of working together, it would be tough to not mention that collaboration has become quite a bit harder for us. So we focus a lot now on communicating much more than we have in the past. There's thousands of miles between all of us at the studio.
An image of Earth from space with points on the map of North America.
Just a quick look at Google Earth, across the globe here. It's, some of us are in Mexico right now, Texas, New York, North Carolina, of course, Chicago, California, Portland. We're very spread out, but near and far, what we typically like to do is follow a project flow. We have a process for how that works.
A timeline titled Project Flow, a collaborative process. Circles from left to right: research, exploration, strategy, creation, application, evaluation, document. Design Pod is involved from the start, but our big moment to shine begins in the creation phase.
And that project flow is really just our form of a collaborative process. And that starts with, on the far left, research, where in research phase, we pretty much dive deep to understand who we're talking to and how we can help them. In the exploration phase, this is where we start to imagine or, and think about how we might entice an audience to engage and learn more with them. And when we get to strategy, this is where we start to bring the vision and the tactics of what we're going to do together. A key deliverable here in this phase might be something like a brand strategy deck or visual inspiration that we would present. Creation in part of this process is where we start to visually explore what strategy may look like through our design process. When we get to application, this is when it hits the real world. So digital, maybe physical. This is where that work is seen. Think of it sort of like a launch strategy in a way. And evaluation, we always want to look back and think about, what did we miss? What's left to do? This is a good time to really reflect on the work so that we can move ahead. And then of course, our last step, which is much more of an internal step, is really about documentation. And this is where that work we put our efforts together to really make that a case study for our site that we can share out. And of course, in Design Pod, we're involved from the start in what we do, but our real big moment to shine sort of starts in that creation phase. That creation phase is really about being and sort of staying in the zone and finding our inspiration there. But always remembering as we work through those things to come up for air and say hi to the rest of the team, because we really feel like working alone is not collaborating. When we find ourselves at a pause, that can be a signal, to either problem solve or kickstart a conversation, to just ask for help from the rest of the team. Checking in on one another and ourselves, knowing team interests for exciting outcomes and future potential project opportunities, and always watching out for, I'm sure it's, on everybody's mind, just what feels like a COVID drag in our work. All of this keeps us from going to battle with the left and right sides of our brains alone every day. Remote work shouldn't be lonely work. And a few tactics that we've come up with over the past few months, really the last year, to help fight that feeling of the lonelies: shared workspaces, open Zoom rooms, gather town, lunch and brunch and learns, learning Fridays, daily stand-ups in the morning, leadership meetings, dope web tech channel and Slack, and especially Rumbles, which is really important to Design Pod. And the idea of Rumbles come from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. Just read a quote about what that is. A rumble is a discussion, a conversation, or a meeting defined by a commitment to learn, to lean into vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, stick with the messy middle of problem identification and solving, to take a break, circle back when necessary, to be fearless in owning our parts. And really, it just means honesty. And maybe that's not about work. Maybe that's just about each other and what's going on in our lives. All of these tactics, from rumbles to daily learning, really provides us moments to get curious about and learn from one another. It helps us grow, and that helps us make that work feel much more important. So thinking about that idea of important work, I'm going to show a few examples of that in the upcoming moments, but we can think about the different types of work that the studio does sort of as three broad categories. The first broad category really being around the idea of traditional branding and identity, which feels a lot like paying client work. Number two, it isn't separate from number one, but experimental topography and community building tends to be more about the events and fun times that we have. Number three, nonprofit grantee-focused brand work is best captured by talking about the Grant for Good. So the first example, talking about the idea of identity work, is a project we recently finished, one of our favorites of recent memory, Designing a Better Chicago, and that really lives as sort of an identity as a creative platform.
A logo consisting of a vertical line with two lines branching from the top and bottom in a Y shape. Around the lines, the text Designing a Better Chicago moves.
So right away, you can see the logo animating on the right-hand side, but Designing a Better Chicago was an annual celebration really for the residents and visitors of Chicago. It was highlighting the impact of design on civic life in the city. And the program supports local individuals, artists, organizations that were using the power of design to advance the social good through design impact grants.
Photos of manhole covers. A pitted aged cover that says Chicago Sewer. A logo with a Y shape and a circle, Department of Public Works.
And when we began this project, of course, we started with inspiration. And we found that inspiration in the Overlooked, which was Chicago's municipal symbol and municipal device. And that iconic symbol really hides in plain sight across the entire city. And it references the 19th century engineering marvel of really reversing the river or the flow of the Chicago River. And that linear form that we worked with was really meant to reflect what's great about Chicago back to Chicago. It provides a meaningful foundation for that whole visual system that we're going to look at through the next few slides.
A photo of a book cover with a double Y symbol. Designing a Better Chicago.
So with that mark in place, we really set out to create a highly flexible system of photography, color blocking, strong photography, which are all things that really show up in a lot of our work. The least amount of elements with the highest amount of impact. And we can start to see a few of these posters come to life where flexibility and ease for whoever's going to be using the system is top of mind, high priority. Easy to put in a different photo, easy to put in artwork from a different artist, always leaning back on the strength of the logo, the dates, the elements that are there. It's hard to mess that up.
cards, boxes, and a tote bag bearing the logo and text in black and white and green.
When we get into internal and external communications in regards to the collateral, we had suggested that we really start with a clear and focused layout, since awareness was low. And over time, stronger overlapping elements would start to appear as public awareness began to elevate. So we can see the collateral here, and we start to think about that moving out into the larger world.
Animated versions of the logo that stretch and shrink.
We wanted to build in this idea of the logo being able to shift and flex and adapt and fit a variety of spaces and formats. That was definitely our primary goal in this identity. Guidance on how to stretch and scale that was introduced in the brand guides that we also delivered alongside the work as we moved to complete that. You can see how that elongation and stretching and scaling really comes to life in the vinyl banners or applications out in the public life, or the hypothetical billboards and public installation that would announce what this event is all about.
Photos of banners on buildings with the elongated double Y logo, a billboard with a photo of women dancing showing half and full versions of the logo.
And then of course the website, that's where the full expression of the visual identity really came to pass. It provides an interactive platform here to really learn more about designing a better Chicago, and worked to highlight the Design Impact Grant program on the site.
An animation of the website with links at top. The website background is the half Y logo. The website appears on mobile phone screens against photo backgrounds of bricks, wood, and water.
And of course, what we were looking at through all of this identity, these dramatic floods of color and strong type shift as the users really scroll through the content on all the devices that we're constantly thinking about when we're working on a website design, which is desktop, tablet, and mobile. So that's the first example. I'm going to pass it over to Dean for example number 2, an example of the studio's personal work, Typeforce, community, and creation.
Dean Sweetnick.
Yes, hello everyone. So Typeforce really was a big piece of why I wanted to work at Firebelly in the first place. And it's a project that the three of us have worked together for the last couple of years. But it started way back in 2010 and it has now kind of grown into its own organization kind of outside of Firebelly, actually run by Will here and also Nermeen Mufti, who used to work for the studio as well. And it's really this bringing together of kind of that community and creation.
Overlapping black and white photos of panels of lights, cords, 3D objects hanging in a gallery building.
And it began in 2010, as I said, as a kind of a curated gallery. So really intent on showcasing the best of the best typography in Chicago. And in previous years, Firebelly has organized, planned, and curated the event located in Co-Prosperity Sphere in Chicago's Bridgeport neighborhood, if anyone on this familiar with Chicago. And in addition to all of that, the events, the gallery, the organization, the Firebelly team has created the front window display every single year. And the GIF you see here is really just a brief, painfully small sample of the years of work and late nights that have gone into the front window over the years since 2010. So that quick 5 seconds really represents countless hours of window display work.
Photos of people standing in front of a wall of white neon illuminated X shapes.
And I say painfully small because every year it really is a whirlwind and invigoration, not only within ourselves, but really within the design community in Chicago. Especially being hosted in the middle of the long Chicago winter, people come out to celebrate, and they really do celebrate and party a little bit that night. And what you'll see here is a sample of the latest displays from the last 2 years. So Typeforce X in 2019 on the left, and Typeforce 11 in this last year in 2021.
Animated photos of people walking by vertical beams of light that turn on and off as they pass.
These displays were built by Tom, Will, and I, and all of them involved a little bit of play, some new tools, a lot of trial and error, and the methods of building were very different for each, and it kind of like led and informed one another. So Typeforce X ended up being a lot of iteration. As the 10th and last Firebelly sanctioned installment of Typeforce, it became a celebration of construction and really figuring out like how can we piece together all the lessons that we've learned. We figured out a sort of assembly line to construct 20 of those X's that you see on the left there, and they're lit up with some little rudimentary wiring. And then with Typeforce 11, we evolved that wiring where the display was then kind of a form of LED screen, lighting up like strips of LED lights that would turn on and off with some Arduino board, lots and lots of play.
A photo of bits of sawdust. A photo of a hand soldering wires with a long tool.
But before we actually reached those masterpieces, which we are very proud of, it took a lot of work, a lot of splinters, sawdust, lots of soldering, and so much wire. Cannot tell you how much wire. Yes, so much wire. Maybe 700 yards, I think.
A photo of a gloved hand sawing wood. Bundles of wires strung through a space in a wall.
So both years differed, yet informed one another. And over the course of Typeforce, 11 years of creating this display, we've learned a lot. And we'll learn how to kind of optimize these large scale builds by price and material and illumination. Tom really harnessed the mastery of woodworking and material skills and has become kind of graduating to metalworking. And I've taken a lot more affinity towards circuitry and lighting, which I never really would have imagined. And we all take on different roles each year, kind of gathering these lessons and sharing with one another as we kind of collaborate together on it. So Tom's construction skills and techniques really helped us kind of construct these finger joints and lap joints that you see on the left. That really was essential to kind of making those X constructions there. And that lesson in construction was then used 1 year later to inform Typeforce 11. So the structure became a lot faster and easier to produce and allowed for a lot more time and play on the lighting and circuitry and the Arduino board and the wiring.
A person affixes wooden X shapes to a wall. Wires entering a circuit board. A man operates a table saw.
So playing with tools in this way, playing with this creation and physicality has allowed us to experiment and recontextualize typography. So still these forms through this physical construction. And the process is really informing how we handle client work and inspiring how we do physical and environmental branding, what might be possible in that physical space when we kind of bring those brands to life. What does motion look like, and how can we kind of create it in that way? And what does custom typed work and look like, and how can we kind of switch it up? And just recently, a client has actually asked us to use our CNC machine just for some prototyping. So it really is starting to come in handy.
A crowd of people standing under colorful neon lights.
And it's really important to just highlight that the community is really drawn in by the physicality of the concepts and also by the physicality of the work within the gallery. So although the work for Typeforce at the beginning was just local back in 2010, it has grown each year to showcase global submissions and participants. And so work that used to be just individual local artists is really like full college classes, international typographers, sometimes type designers. And the opening night typically gathers an audience of around 1,000 of all ages. So you could see the kids kind of interacting with type, families, and really everyone. And over the last 11 years of the show, curated work itself has kind of evolved and become larger and more interactive and inventive. So where things would typically end up being posters in the beginning, it's really become a lot more mural-like, a lot more sculptural, and it's really pressing the boundaries of conceivable typographic play.
3 aluminum beverage cans with black and white graphic design. Typeforce 11 Double Dry Hopped Hazy Double IPA.
And Typeforce is far from over. So like I said in the beginning, it's now really grown into its own entity of designers in 2019. Like I said, one of which are very own Will. And we still will collaborate with them from time to time. They'll be making their own brands. I believe their website is coming soon.
An animation of rows of black circles stretching. They turn into the word vroom. 2010. Stretching and constricting.
So feel free to follow along with all of their updates. The next Typeforce, I think, will be in 2022. And I think there's actually a book, a 10-year retrospective book that you can probably buy soon that will be announced. So please feel free to follow them. Oh, yeah, and handing off to Tom, we can talk about the grant for bid.
Tom Tian.
Thank you so much, Dean. So as Will mentioned previously, the Grant for Good is one of the 3 broad types of work we do here at Firebelly. Simply put, the grant is our annual pro bono project where we donate a full year's worth of design and strategy services to a nonprofit. And that's a pretty big commitment for us as a small studio. Not to get too much into the dollars to cents, but it's basically like a 6-figure grant of services. And we do it because we really value helping folks who are fighting that good fight and need that extra bit of momentum to hone their messaging and expand their reach. And it's also why we approach our grantees as we would any ordinary client, which is to say, as equals, not saviors. And on a really personal level, it's one of the reasons why we were drawn to working for Firebelly in the first place. I certainly know it was for me when I applied. And we've been doing this since 2004. And obviously, I haven't been here for that long, but I really want to talk about just 3 of the grantees I've had the privilege of working on since I started at Firebelly.
A background photo of wet green leaves. A logo consisting of a looping line forming an 8-pronged symmetrical shape inside a circle. Plant Chicago, closed loop, open source.
So first up, we have Plant Chicago, a really passionate team committed to developing sustainable models of urban development in the back of the yards, a neighborhood in Chicago's predominantly Black and Latinx Southwest side. And their bread and butter is creating closed loop economy. So basically where the so-called quote waste of one process is the input for a next process and so on and so forth until it loops back in on itself. And it's that process which informs the look of that logo where we have these coiling loops within the circular form, because I ultimately cannot design a logo without it being a dad joke. And we began working with them right as they were growing into their own as an organization, because they were originally part of this green startup incubator called Plant Chicago.
A screenshot of the Plant Chicago webpage. 3 logos made of thick lines showing a square full of fish, a factory with smokestacks, and chickens and chicks.
So this was also the very first branding project, by the way, that I worked on at Firebelly. And one of the things that we always want to bring to our work is to have it hit that really sweet spot between character and reproducibility. And that'll vary depending on particular client staffing and resources. Our first step here, as Will had mentioned earlier in that process diagram, was to listen, to do our research, to ask questions. And here was during workshops or on tours of the facilities. And that gave us a really good firsthand impression and appreciation of their personality and what they do. And that's how we landed at the system where we have a suite of illustrations enclosed within these simple to work with square holding shapes that capture that range of services that they do and can moreover be easily arranged in patterns and textures to create different configurations of layouts. In addition, we also provide strategy docs, identity guidelines, print templates, site design, which you can see here, and we also offer CMS training.
A hand picking up a red sheet with a photo of a police officer. Text, history of voter suppression.
Shifting our focus for a minute to a smaller organization, sometimes our grantees really only have 2 or 3 full-time employees, and that was the case with the Chicago Freedom School. Inspired by the Mississippi Freedom Schools of the 60s, CFS is all about training young folks and adult allies to think critically and dismantle systems of oppression. So a very sadly still always timely and noble task.
Screenshots of a web page in red, black and white color scheme with a circular flower logo consisting of 2 layers of red blunt arrow or L shapes. Text, Chicago Freedom School. Empowering youth, honoring the past, building movements for justice.
So with such a small team who also had a really full plate of programming on their hands, we knew that we had to keep things simpler. As with all of our other clients, we lay that groundwork by listening and asking questions, and in this instance, with the very young folks who are so central to CFS. The result was this identity where the mark, this floral icon that encapsulates their egalitarian pedagogical model, whose parts become this framing device. You can see those sort of arrows or L's breaking apart, framing different elements, images and photos. Really plays that greater, more central role, supplemented by bold colors and type instead of more complex components like illustrations, which would be cumbersome to reproduce later on. We also stayed away from premium design programs as much as we could. So creating these assets originally in, say, Illustrator or Sketch, but then ultimately opting for free apps like Canva so as to not disrupt their existing workflow. Again, we'd never want our work to get in the way of their work. And I've, as an aside, I've seen that mark actually around town at various protests and actions, and it's just been really been a pleasure to see young folks take that and use that in their day-to-day work.
A red cloth with a logo and a white line diamond, G/G.
I don't like to pick favorite clients, but Girls Garage was just a real blast to work with. They are an after-school program in Berkeley with classes in, this is taken from there about us, carpentry, welding, architecture, engineering, and activist art. And that their goal is to equip girls with tools to build the world they want to see. And for them, we really just pulled out all the proverbial stops because it to do otherwise would have been to not do justice to all their energy and boldness and ambition. We
A screenshot of a web page with a blue photo of a young woman in a helmet. Text, fearless, build more. Red and white diamond-shaped enamel pens with a G/G logo and logos for tools.
Here what that meant was that we created a custom display font. We commissioned custom portraits of the fearless builder girls themselves, working with a fantastic photographer called Giselle Hernandez, who has since gone to do just really, really also like super amazing work. I really recommend that you follow her. And we also rounded out the system by really extending that brand from these bigger moments in wayfinding and signage, which aren't pictured here, but it is on our site, to really small things like custom enamel pins commemorating participants' achievements. And here, this identity incorporated both hand-drawn and mechanical elements, again, to capture both their commitment to something that's really precise in that sort of drafting, engineering, architectural world, and also to that construction, really hands-on elements. And it's just been super rewarding to see them grow their community and presence, and just how excited all the builder girls are.
3 circles connected by lines to form a triangle. Text, curating a beautiful unity. Art, design, community.
I think what we try to do at Firebelly is to get at the sort of triune of art, design, and community. And to do so, to reiterate what Will said earlier, by bringing ourselves to bear, working collaboratively. And I think part of what has made all these projects successful is in bringing ourselves, we mean not only our passions and our skills, but also our perspectives. There's so much collaboration that goes on behind the scenes in each of those projects that at the end of the day, it just feels so wrong to say that, oh, well, this is, my project or the thing that I worked on. Because if not for discussions with Will and Dean, there have been so many things that we individually would not have really been able to see or grok otherwise. But like Will said, there have been those times we just need to take a pause, reassess, and regroup. And that's when we do our best work.
Will Miller, marathon winner, at Q_type. Tom Tian, rocket scientist, at T_1017. Dean Sweeney, absolute mad yoke, at T_sweetie.
And thank you so much for having us. And we will open the floor to questions. And if you heard a cat meowing, that is because this is a 2-cat household and they do not care for Zoom etiquette.
Trawick.
I don't blame them. Tom, remind us the name of the designer that you mentioned that who worked on Girls Garage. You said we should follow.
Oh, the photographer's name is Giselle Hernandez.
Thank you so much. So we've got one here from Devin we can start with. So it says, as a designer, did it take a while to start doing work that you found made a large social impact? Was there a stage, excuse me, sorry, things are coming in here. Was there a stage where you worked to keep afloat financially at the beginning of your career, or did you start pursuing socially active work immediately?
Miller.
I can take the first stab at that. Financially, yeah, I mean, I think financially for many of those first years, I was totally broke. Like when you're doing it alone, you're coming out of school. That's super tough. I also moved from a different state. I was coming up from Florida and moving to Chicago. For me, like I completely lost my network when I did that. So, it took 2 or 3 years to feel, I think, somewhat comfortable, and even then still, I don't think at that point I had a solid idea of what type of work I was going to be good at actually doing. I had interests in lots of different kinds of work. But I'll be honest, like, I think most people find themselves in a situation where you don't really get to do work like this, like we're talking about, especially Grant for Good work, until maybe we arrived at the studio in a way, and I think that's just an important point. It's Yeah, like the majority of opportunities out there aren't like this and don't do this kind of work, and that's special. So
Tian.
And for me, I graduated undergrad sort of into not quite like the middle of the Great Recession, but definitely still very much during it. And for the first year or so, it was eating humble pie, living my parents' house, not in the basement, but at my parents' place, and also you know also basically being broke. Um, I so I think there's this sort of narrative of doing uh, like selling out and then sort of redeeming yourself through um, nonprofit or nonprofit work. And I personally had some of that. I'm not proud to say that my first design internship was for basically a payday loan company, um, and that was during college. And a part of me has always felt pretty crappy about having done that. Um, and after college, I did some production design internships that were not glamorous work, but it's not like we were say like selling cigarettes to kids or anything. Um, and I worked in-house for my alma mater for a number of years before joining Firebelly. Um, so the weight is there, but I will say that it's genuinely a tough kind of needle to thread, if you will.
Sweet Nick.
Yeah, and I would say my experience and kind of travel to this place was different from Will's and Tom's in that I graduated in 2018. 2018, I think. Time is kind of crazy right now. But and then I quickly found myself 3 months later at Firebelly. And before that, I took a lot of internships, kind of really prioritizing work and trying to do a lot more of this design for good, working in this sector. Like that was really kind of what I knew I wanted to do. So my path was direct because I kind of decided in the middle of my college path that I wanted to do this. And so I was kind of able to kind of navigate and figure out and ask a lot of people, asking so many people what cities I could go to and what companies I could go to, and creating so many lists of people to talk to. Lists were essential to kind of navigate that realm after post-grad, but it also took a lot of internships kind of navigating similarly typical design agency waters before I got there, for sure.
Trawick.
That's really interesting. I love hearing all the different sort of pathways that you all took, from your education and your sort of career path, right? And which led you to Firebelly. I think Tom, you're perhaps having those other jobs really clarified for you what the focus that you wanted. And then interesting too, Dean, that you were really thinking about that as a student, to think about your future. So those are both really interesting considerations for those of you who are studying right now. Yeah, great.
Thank you, guys.
So I've got a question from Cabrina. What does the process look like for Firebelly to choose a nonprofit to work with? Do the nonprofits have to apply? So I assume you're talking about the Grant for Good program. Yeah, great.
Tian.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we do have some criteria set up for things like organization, budget, and not necessarily things like staff size, but one of the things that we do want to achieve with the Grant for Good is that we want to, it's less of a boundary setting so much as making sure that we are entering into a process of being able to emerge from the other end having done concrete, good, helpful work. And in order to get there, I think some of that is that we do need to be realistic that like we ask that folks be able to have enough time to be able to meet with us, to be able to talk. And that can be tough. Like organizations, some of these organizations are really small and overextended. And realistically, it's you don't want to commit yourself um, to helping someone, but only to find yourself being unable to really actually do good in the end. But as for the sort of other general criteria, it kind of evolves through discussions internally with members of the team. Some of it responds to changes in circumstance. Like I think the year in which Chicago Freedom School was selected as the grantee, we also had other applicants who were doing, say, working creating like animal shelters in Chicago. And I think when it was 2017, 2018, it just felt like we have to do work for CFS because that spoke so much to the present moment.
Sweet Nick.
Yeah, and I think building off of that, like it gets really hard every year, and we actually just recently finished our interviews with some of our grant clients for this year. But every year it's difficult because we receive so many applications from wonderful organizations, and every single one of them has an amazing mission. And so it really does come down to like which one of them can we ensure a really productive and powerful partnership with? Because it's like we could just step into their organization and then give them things that probably won't suit their needs. And it's like we don't know what's best for them. And truly, we need to listen to them and make sure that we have a solid partnership that is like strong communication together, and that we can kind of. And so it's not just about like them trusting us. Like we really need to like work with them and hear their story. And collaborate in that way. And that's kind of how we've found the most successful partnerships with the grants, for sure.
Miller.
It's a really good point, and I think we forgot to even mention it. Last year's grant, of course, being top of mind, Lou Besnick, which was a gallery space on, oh man, I'm blanking on the city now, in around the river, around the around the lake.
Michigan City,
And
yeah.
Michigan City, there it is. It's like the opposite wrong name for where it is. But like Dean was saying there, not giving them things that would get in the way, and making sure that we're responding to what it is that they need. And it was sort of like a series of evaluations and reevaluations as we worked on that project throughout the entire year. And when we got sort of to the point of midsummer, I think we sort of took a step back and said, wow, this was really successful. They're really showing up and doing a lot of work here. But are we about to sort of turn the corner into the next phase and give them a whole bunch of things that they don't actually need? And it was kind of a reset on the project in a way of, maybe you don't need all this signage. People are not actually going into the space right now. What if we focused on some of these other things, and really focused heavily more on the tools that you could use for future places like Canva to make announcements or physical pieces or social media elements, stuff that their entire team could actually really benefit from. They just happen to be really lucky and have a great designer on their staff who worked really closely with us. But it was definitely one of the best partnerships, I think, in the grants that we've had, in terms of how much work we were able to do and how much we understood was really going to benefit them. It was just a very side-by-side partnership in how we approached that one.
Trawick.
If I could follow up, I think, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who, but one of you said, it wasn't about coming in and being a savior. And so I think, that's really what you're describing, right? That listening relationship and giving folks what they need, right?
Miller.
It's something that we often talk about in the work, whether it's the grant or if it's client work. It's just, are we going to give them something they can use that they won't feel, afraid of, that they're going to always sort of feel guilty about working with, that there's high risk of messing it up, I guess. And we don't want to do that, of course. And I think Tom made that point great as he was talking through the Grant for Good. It's giving them the right tools, the tools that are easy to work with, making sure that that's comfortable for whoever, because that's definitely one of the most important audiences. Who is going to use that work? Who's going to see that work? We just really want to understand that. So we're giving them exactly what they need and working with them to make that the best that it can be. Templates, whatever that might end up being.
Hadel.
Might fire off another question from the chat here. Maybe it might expand on what you were just talking about from Trevin. They ask, on your website, it mentions that you like to give back to the community, obviously. Do you do that in more ways than just offering a year of free services?
Tian.
We do as a studio also make annual annual donations, and as for the other programs, it's been sort of in flux, I think, because the studio it has also undergone a lot of different changes, like moving from our old office to the post office presented a pretty big change, because the nonprofit Reason to Give that we ran, which provided a lot of, I guess, would be called sort of like life skills kind of education and training and community to folks in the neighborhood. That became much more difficult because the local angle changed because of our geographic change. And I think sustaining that became a somewhat more difficult proposition. But having said that, it's that was one of the things that we were definitely doing. And I think in the past too, I know this is before my time, albeit barely, but we used to do Camp Firebelly, which I think Will can speak more to. But that was sort of a kind of crazy, epic, like design sprint almost. Would you say, Will? Is that an accurate kind of encapsulation?
Miller.
Yeah, and 10 years ago, the spirit of design sprints were like, don't sleep, work hard, and torture yourself. And of course, like that's not sustainable, especially as a lot of us are sort of hitting our 40s right now. So, it was a quick. That was one way that we could get 10 younger folks into the studio to work with us to understand our process, what it's like to work on clients, sort of like the Grant for Good, in a process of design that we typically follow. It just, the compression of that 10 days, 10 students, just amped up the anxiety and the pace a lot, making it really, really hard to sort of feel comfortable in that environment. So while it was great and the outcome was always incredible, and you left feeling exhausted, and things got done and printed and websites were made, it was definitely a sprint, and it was definitely a challenge, but memories forever, for sure. Of the years that I was involved with it, I forget how many, 5 or 6, since the beginning, every single one of those people who went through it, we stay in touch, we've talked, continue to talk. It's interesting sort of following along in their trajectories, because it was super inspiring, as well as the organizations too, like what they went on to do and how some of those connections have come back as well. I believe a subtle connection in one of the years of Camp Firebelly led to the Girls Garage project itself. So, there's just all kinds of ways that we've done that in the past. It's just, I think there's a new appetite and a new way of doing that we haven't completely figured out as some of us get older and have other life commitments, going on. So, like when Camp Firebelly started, we were all, late 20s, just hanging out endless amounts of time doing design and staying up late, but that's a lot tougher now. So,
Tian.
I mean, the studio definitely, no one's stopping us as individuals from also, doing work within our respective networks and communities. Whether or not that's something as direct as, say, like volunteerism or other educational programs or seminars, or discounted or free client work for basically our own little sort of grants for good, if you will. So that also does happen.
Trawick.
That's great. So a question from Luz. When you're looking to add a new member to your team, what do you think the newest generation of applicants are missing and lacking in their experience and portfolios? Maybe if you could mention 5 central factors, that would be helpful.
Sweet Nick.
That's an interesting one that I can hop in. I mean, I always struggle just personally even approaching things from a point of lacking. I don't think it's kind of hard to pinpoint an entire group of people and what they don't have, but like I definitely would say like things to always kind of build on is have a strong perspective and know who you are, know what drives you and as an individual, and kind of how do you express yourself visually, and I think creating it, yeah, I always find it difficult to kind of say like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, because then that is really limiting. It's really limiting on an individual. And then I think the best work is created from a confidence standpoint. And I think the best expression of yourself is created from a confidence standpoint. So how do you really learn and get in touch with that individual spirit of communication? And yeah, that's one that I would really latch onto.
Miller.
You know, and I would add to that too. I mean, I think it's an incredible point. I think like the confidence in knowing your role in a project too, you know, it is, my experience in school was very much, you know, you are alone, you will make this work, you will be done, and that will be your project. And that's not how it happened. And, you know, for us, that's not how it happens. We are one of many people in that process of how work gets made. And we need each other to make the work much stronger and much better. You know, and I think understanding even on those interviews when you talk about your role in even school work, just understanding where you fit in, who you've talked to, and how they've inspired your own work, it's huge to hear, because I think that shows like, you know, you're a team player, and that is really what's important as much as understanding your own process. Like I think Dean is sort of describing, it's just being able to understand how you get to that place, that zone, the way of making, because when it comes down to it, like we're hiring somebody more often than not for their brain, for their ideas and their thought process, and the way that they understand that about themselves and how they get to that place is really, really important, because we want that to be something that's repeatable, not just a one-off, you know, in an individual style that's, you know, very narrow in that way. You'd be working alongside of us, coming up with fresh new things at every moment that a project would start. So
Tian.
To echo what Will said, we've done some portfolio reviews, and I think the number one thing that comes up. So sorry about the to leave the other 4 items blank, but it really is like presentation and being able to explicate and discuss your work in this way that is straightforward, that when you're doing it in writing on your portfolio site, you know, avoids obtuse academic language, and being able to just very clearly present the problem and illustrate how what you did ties into the parameters of the project or the problem that you're trying to solve.
Hadel.
Kabrina asks, what is something you wish you knew or did that you didn't learn or do in school? So,
hard question for me, since I study political science. I'll hand it to Will and Dean for that one. I learned nothing.
Miller.
I mean, that's so hard to answer. You know, and I could probably have a different answer for that every day of the week. But I think to sort of loop it back around to, I forget how this came up, but just the idea, you know, so I graduated in 2002. The idea that places like this or doing work like this existed kind of didn't exist in that moment. I'm sure it did, but it just seems so much harder to focus on what we do as designers or visual communicators. It was just so different. It felt really different. The same way that like when I was leaving school, I had no idea I was ever going to be designing web pages, because we didn't do that, you know, like that wasn't in our scope. That wasn't in our realm. No one was really doing that yet. So the rules hadn't been written. So I wish that I had known that doing this type of work and feeling good about what you do and not going to bed feeling guilty, you know, existed at that point. I would have done what Dean did and was able to sort of chase that as a goal. Like I want to work for places like that, because that is important.
Sweetnick.
I think I would focus a lot more on trying to break more rules, I think, in school. And like, I think someone said that in the chat just now. But like, I had that goal, I think, to kind of get to this point I had throughout college. But I think when working on school projects, I was kind of like, okay, what's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do? What's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do? And it's kind of like, how do you break out of that cycle and just focus on the play? And I think, and then how do you take that play and then formalize it and understand like, well, how did I get from point A to point B? And what was my process in that play? That was something I wish I did more in school, instead of just kind of like solving the brief. It's like solving the brief in the way that is most comfortable to me and confident to me, like doing great work for sure and working really hard for sure, but doing it in a more playful and curious way, rather than just, yeah, solving it.
John.
I would say probably something broader, like general, general mental health and self-esteem, which I don't think most programs anywhere really really teach, but I think is really important in any line of creative work, and certainly certainly when you're doing client work, like personally not being able to put a name to something like imposter syndrome and being able to have the mental tools to be able to deal with that and to realize that to sort of think through or think past those sort of obstacles, that that was definitely a huge part of something that I wish I had known going in. And also just that it can take a surprisingly long time. I think there's a Ira Glass quote to the effect of like, when you start out, the stuff you make is just going to be awful, and it'll feel like you're spinning your wheels, and then you just get better and better, and there comes this sort of inflection point where you suddenly find yourself on the other side, and it feels kind of corny to say that, but in some ways it's true. Like keeping at it and just getting a little bit better every day.
Sweetnick.
And I want to add on to that too, because that's you kickstarted my memory too a little bit, Tom, because it's I think learning a little bit more every day, and also trusting in like your decisions and your gut. And I didn't initially actually begin in design. I actually started back doing computer science, like 3 years before I even considered design school, because I wasn't really trusting that instinct. It wasn't really, and it was kind of focused on getting to that, doing the right thing versus the wrong thing again. But I think trusting in that instinct would be another important thing, and it kind of involved a lot of inner confidence as well.
Trawick.
Thank you, guys. What great answers. I love that you're talking about imposter syndrome and confidence, and I think those are things that young designers and students, and not just young, but I think we can all suffer joining a new career path, or trying to consider what we're going to do with our futures. So that's a really critical point. And if y'all don't know imposter syndrome, definitely look it up. It may ring a lot of bells for you. So it's really interesting. Unfortunately we're at time. So I want to be kind to all of you who've made a commitment to be here. I have many more questions, but we'll have to save it for next time, I'm afraid. So I want to thank all of you for being here. Will, Tom, Dean, thanks so much for your incredible generosity and time today. It's great for our students to learn about potential career paths in design. So you're really generous. Thank you for all of you who attended today and for your thoughtful questions. Roman will, again, put the link to a very quick survey. Please take 2 minutes to do that. You'll help us to create future programming. So we appreciate that. But thank you, all of you. Please stay safe and be well out there, and we'll see you next time.
It's been a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, folks.
Chaffey College, Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art. Home Edition.